Iowa's News Now Sports has your all-access pass to all things Hawkeyes. This is Eye on the Hawks.
Good morning, everybody. Good to see everybody. And Merry Christmas. Yeah, we got a tree out there. It's been out there for a couple of weeks, so it gives us a nice reminder that the holiday season is coming.
And the holiday season is here, a very blessed Festivus to one and all who celebrate here on December 23rd. Feats of strength, get the pole out of the crawl space, stop crying and fight your father. Welcome to this Music City Bowl preview edition of Eye on the Hawks, where I am horrifically underdressed. Owen Sebring, Mike Howell bringing in the Christmas tree. There was no text. I don't know if my service stopped or whatever. I thought a vest was enough. It's not. Plenty to get here on December 23rd, 1 week out from the finale of the 2024 Hawkeye football season, the Music City Bowl down in Nashville against number 19 Missouri. Lots to talk about here on a Monday. Hank Brown is here. Sully is back. Next man in at running back as KJ gets ready for the next chapter of his incredible run at running back. We're going to hear from Kirk Ferentz about his portal ponderings and the discussions after the 105 roster cap. And, of course, we'll take a look at the Missouri Tigers, who are missing a very critical piece to their offense as they try to go for a 10th win here in 2024. But first of all, let's start with you, Owen. You were there on Friday as we got to talk with the Hawks for the first time in a few weeks then. What did you take away from players and KF just in those first conversations? Lots to get to here.
Well, it was a strange deal that with who they sent out. I mean, it's always kind of like who has some finals to get ready for, who has a class that they have to do, and so you just never know who you're going to get out there. But we did not see QB1 or RB1 out there. You know, Jazz Patterson was made available to us, but not
Kamari Moulton.
Kamari Moulton, yes. Thank you.
Hopefully
I'm just coming off
Friday
Christmas my last couple days.
Finals, those are the worst finals. I usually had Friday ones in the morning.
And then we talked to Jackson Stratton, but not Brendan Sullivan. Obviously, we would have loved to have heard from Sullivan as well. But there were some good conversations had there. Had a chance to catch up with Luke Elkin for a while, and I'll feature that a little bit more in the next couple days here on the Iowa's News Now television broadcast. But just a lot of people talking about the future and a lot of conversation about who's coming back. Maybe not a lot of talk about the bowl game itself. As we've discussed with these games, I think a lot of people like them, care about them, enjoy playing in them, but this time of year, it's a little bit like there's just a lot of other things to be discussed right now in terms of who's going to come back, who's going into the portal, who's being made an addition to the team. That seems to be where the conversations were revolving around.
Watching Kirk, too, on Friday, a majority of those questions were not about, like, oh, what's Missouri, defense or whatever, what's their offense?
Was there any?
More Bill Belichick questions as he
I know, right?
You would see, which
it makes sense, too, because this transfer portal, and I've heard people say, oh, they should move back till after the season. Well, when you line up the academic schedule, you really can't, because they need to be enrolled before January, before the semester starts. And so how do you do it? And, that is the pressing question. And when you look at Missouri and Iowa, they were both going for a quarterback, and they just got a big Bo Pribula committed to Missouri last night or this morning. So, that's almost the focus now is and Missouri has like 10 to 12 like portal commits already.
Wow.
Like they're really working it right now. And if you want to make your team better and compete next year, you kind of have to focus on that right now, which is kind of like the sad part about it.
Yeah, it's the new age we're in, I guess. But another part of that is just retaining talent. And by the way, before we move forward, the social plugs we got to get in. If you're new to this whole thing, thanks for joining us. December of 2024. We've been here a little bit. Eye on the Hawks on Twitter, Iowa's News Now on the YouTube channel and Instagram page. Keep following that stuff. Mike's been putting together some really great reels and all sorts of clips of a bunch of stuff. So that's fun. So part of the portal is not just going out and getting new guys, but working your tail off to retain some of your talent. We saw that last year. So many guys came back for that sixth season. Jay Higgins, Nick Jackson, Sebastian Castro, and the like. Ethan Hurkett, Aaron Graves both say they are back in 2025, shoring up a defensive line that so many people had a bunch of questions about coming into the season. They didn't have a ton of depth and rotation this year, but boy, the folks that were out there were really good, and you're going to get a lot of those guys back. Y.A. Black and Deontay Craig graduate, but Ethan Hurkett, Aaron Graves talking on Friday about why they are back, and Graves even adding a little bit about what Hurkett brings to the table in 2025.
I think I just wanting to finish out my career as a Hawk and come back for my fourth year. There's still a lot of things that I haven't accomplished in my career that I want to as a team. And so coming back in that sense is really enticing too.
I think that I still have a lot left to work on, a lot I can improve on, and I just couldn't pass up another opportunity to come back here and play with these guys again.
Was there any doubt? I mean, did you seriously consider NFL for a while, or was there always kind of an assurance that you were going to be back for one more year?
I mean, I considered it for sure, but with this D-line room that we have and these coaches and stuff, I wanted to kind of squeeze the last bit out of my career here before moving on.
Obviously, he's been a huge part of our defense the past couple of years, and hearing him coming back is just really big for like the leadership. We obviously have a lot of guys that are going to leave this year, but having him back is I think it's a big part of like the maturity and the leadership that he's going to bring to next year's unit too. So yeah, really excited for that.
Wouldn't be shocked to see Ethan Hurkett be a captain in 2025. We just talked. You had Jay Higgins back, Nick Jackson back, so many guys coming back for either a fifth year or a sixth year, and was such a massive talking point going into 2024, having all that experience. Is this the 2025 version of that where you're going to have a bunch of new guys who have been in the program but coming in for the linebacking core? Your defensive line is going to have a ton of experience back in Aaron Graves, who, when he popped off, he looked fantastic. Yeah. Ethan Hurkett raised things up. We've talked about Max Llewellyn and the plays he made. Saw Brian Allen get out there and make some plays. Kenny Merriweather, kid out of Detroit, who had a big play against, I believe it was maybe Troy or one of those games. We'll see in the highlights. I cut like 2 minutes. If you're watching on the YouTube channel, there's like 2 minutes of defensive line stuff because I just kept looking. It's one of the biggest plays, or at least like the most exciting, visceral plays, all came from that Iowa front four. I think there's a lot to like going into 2025.
You're right, and that's going to be the group that anchors that defense next year, because they've got a lot of question marks to fill on the defense, in the linebacking core and in the secondary. Like, there's just going to be a lot less experience coming back next season in those groups, and so the defensive line is where they're going to be looking for a lot of leadership, and where we're going to have the most talent coming back. Talking to Aaron Graves, it was like I had never really considered that he might go to the NFL after this year, because he's only been on Iowa's roster for 3 years. He could have and maybe been a draft pick, but I mean, I see where he's coming from, where it's like I think he does have potentially a lot more to accomplish. I think that he next year could come in as a preseason pick for one of the best defensive linemen in the conference. Like, I think Aaron Graves has like a super high ceiling in terms of what he could be capable of next year. And yeah, that D-line is going to be so deep and loaded next year.
I think a lot of that from Graves was looking at his size, and before he committed to Iowa, I think a lot of people thought he'd be, maybe him and Xavier were going to be three and done guys just because of their bodies and then their body types and stuff like that. But you're right. Like, there's a lot of not a lot of. No, I'm talking about there's not a lot of experience in the back seven of the defense coming back. So getting the defensive linemen coming back, that's huge. And then when you look at it, there still will be like that front line experience, and then you're going to have to get that depth, because there wasn't a lot of depth this year, and it worked out because there weren't a lot of injuries. But you can't expect that from year to year, just having no injuries in the D-line especially.
And you're going to have guys that have experience stepping into that starting rotation in the linebacking core in 25. Carson Shar should be out there. Jackson Rexroth, who's gotten plenty of run. Jaden Harrell, a guy we've talked about. Him and Max Llewellyn, high school teammates at Urbandale, going to be two of the 11 starters you would imagine going into 2025. So there's guys who have played special teams that will evolve in, but you're not seeing a lot of defensive linemen out there on special teams. It's tough to get reps for those guys in any sort of playing capacity unless you're in a rotation on the D-line. And again, Jeremiah Pittman you saw in there too, who's played a little bit the last couple of years. It's just tough to get them more experience until they're actually in the D-line, and that's something that Kelvin Bell and Jay Neiman, they're waiting for those guys to prove themselves, to get thrown in there and show something there. Brian Allen was a guy I remember flashed a couple of years ago in the spring. Mm-hmm. That was all the questions on the Zoom with Kelvin, later that season. Like, talking about Brian Allen, Brian Allen's got a long way to go. Guess what? Brian Allen has moved quite a bit, and now he's going to be right in there. It's defensive line is such a fascinating position to try and develop experience, because they're not the linebackers and DBs that you can throw on special teams and get them more just live game reps. They've got to be in the trenches somehow, and you've got to be encouraged with what you saw from those quote-unquote backups. Max Llewellyn didn't look like a backup anytime he was out there. That guy made some of the most pivotal plays of the season at some points. It's just going to be fun to see those guys, especially in that leadership role with Hurkett sound like leading the way.
A lot of times I think we kind of just take it for granted, or assume, like, with the assistant coaches on that team, that, like, all right, all these guys are going to be back as long as they want to be. But it's like, boy, Kelvin Bell, I feel like based on the performance that the D-line has had in his tenure at Iowa, that guy's he's got to be in high demand for somebody who could take over as a DC somewhere else. I mean, that guy's produced a lot of really high caliber talent with the Hawkeyes.
Yeah, and talk about retaining talent. Keep Kelvin Bell in Iowa City as long as you can, as long as he wants to be here, because he's tremendous.
Well, I got 2 points. One is the one thing about the linebacker, you do have guys who have played, not just special teams, some downs, but you can't expect every year. And remember when Jack Campbell left, you're like, well, but then Jay Higgins played so well. How lucky can you, and I shouldn't say lucky, but how it's almost like Green Bay, I'm a Packer fan, wearing my Packer jersey now, with their quarterbacks. It's like Favre, Rodgers, Love. Do you expect Jaden Harrell to come in and be like, he waited too, he's going to be a stud? That's a tough ask, and I'm sure he'll do his best. But let's temper, we're not making expectations. It's going to be tough to see the same production level. Second, on the D-line, you might have an impact player too coming in with Epinesa. I mean, he's probably going to get snaps, right? Yeah. And he's going to be explosive, you think, if he's anything like his brother who played as a true freshman. So more excited about the D-line, but when you have a good front four, like that can shore up some things on the back end.
Yeah, opens up for those young linebackers to get in there and make some plays too. If you're, how many, we talk about Jay and Nick having so many tackles. Wyatt Black, we talk about him not having stats. His presence there opened up a lot of opportunities for those guys in the back seven there to get in and make plays. So it's going to be exciting. The tough part, though, about going out and getting into the portal, maybe losing some guys, is this roster cap cutting from 120 to 105. And Kirk Ferentz was asked on Friday just about the toughness. We've seen so many guys have to jump in that were, true freshmen or redshirt freshmen or walk-ons, having to say goodbye to the Hawkeye football program. It's, again, just the nature of the current beast. And we'll give you 2.5 minutes here from KF on what he refers to as just awful conversations and how Iowa is going to maybe look going forward after so many years, quarter century of really having a great foundation of walk-ons rising to the occasion.
We've seen some of the casualties of the 105 roster cap. What was the process like of going through those discussions and getting your roster down to 105, and where do you stand on that ruling now?
It's been the hardest part of this month, and it could have been so easily avoided if we had just stair-stepped it. And I know, I'm sure it was a financial decision. Nobody asked me for my opinion or filled me in on the details, but I'm sure it was a financial decision like everything we do. I would argue that you could have, whatever the dollar amount was, kept it the same and spread it, let's say 120 or 118, spread it amongst 118 instead of 105, and not have bloodletting, and that's the regrettable part in my mind. So we basically, there's a couple of ways to do it, and I don't know what other people are doing. I've heard other people are approaching it differently, but we felt very strongly as a staff that, we owed it to any player that might be in jeopardy to let them know the week following our last game what the status was, and give them an opportunity to go out and, prepare for whatever they want to prepare for. And we've had guys leave the program at that point. They've left the program. We've had other guys who are going to go to other places, but they're staying with the program throughout the bowl. Everybody's getting bowl gifts and all that stuff. Everybody had the opportunity to stay with us and go to the bowl site and be part of this, finish out the season with us as a team member. And then also, they had the option of doing whatever they want to do. We've had some guys leave and already find other homes. So we just felt like, it was the right thing to do to give everybody a chance to, at least, if they want to prepare for the future, do it. If they want to stay here, that's great too. But it just, it was hard. That's hard. And then, the whole next chapter is going to be really interesting too, because practice with 108 guys, 105 guys in college football. This is not the NFL. Nobody's even brought up what happens if a guy has a season-ending injury. We can't go out and bring somebody in to replace that guy. So it makes practice a challenge. It makes developing a team a challenge. And those are questions and discussions for post-January. But I'm not looking forward to that, because it's going to, I think it impacts a program like ours more so than people that recruit 5-star athletes every year, because they're a little bit more ready-made, and it's just. But that's the way it goes. So we'll figure out a way to make it an advantage.
Mike just brought up A.J. Epinesa, and what a story I think his first career sack was that opener in 17 against Wyoming. First career sack, Josh Allen, and now they're teammates. Imagine that.
Life is a full circle.
Yeah, it is. You talk about the 5-star guys come in, and they're they're not as good of stories if they have success, right? Because that's the expectation. So much of what Iowa hangs its hat on as an NFL developmental program is that they're not bringing in 5-star tight end recruits. They're not bringing in 5-star offensive linemen. They're bringing in these 2-star diamonds in the rough, or they're getting walk-ons in some cases.
High school quarterback they've turned into a tight end.
6 years ago today, Quinn Schulte commits to Hawkeye football as a walk-on. He's going to start his 40th straight game at free safety next week in his finale, and I think the only other guy I could think of off the top of my head who started 40 games as a defensive back at Iowa is Brett Greenwood, another guy who came in with low expectations or low fanfare, whatever you want to call it, and is one of the most inspirational stories because of what he's done off the field over the last decade or so. Are you worried about, you want to win games and the scholarship thing might help you bring in more star talent, whatever you want to call it. Are you worried that Iowa loses what makes it Iowa in some cases, that they don't get as many of these walk-on opportunities? Race Heitman's got an opportunity to do some really cool stuff. Ryan Fitzgerald, Pat's kid, coming in as a walk-on quarterback. Maybe he's got a chance to light a spark, but you've got less of those opportunities. Does that worry you as storytellers, as Hawkeye fans? Are you losing Iowa's essence in a way? And maybe they'll have more success, but do you connect as much? Is this anything that's viable in any way?
I don't know
fears.
I don't know if I worry, but it does make me. If you look through Iowa football, there's a ton of walk-ons that come here and perform
feels like the
well.
end of an era, kind of. Right?
Yeah,
A little bit, yeah.
It almost seemed like there was one safety a year that was a walk-on.
If you're a parochial walk-on safety from Eastern Iowa, you're going to start 20 games somehow. I mean, it's from Kerner to Javas to Joe Conklin was in there for a while back when I was in school, and he's still with the university. It's just that became a thing. Jack Kerner was in there as well.
There was a term that a friend of mine who's a big Hawkeye fan who I know watches the podcast sometimes, Luke Hawthorne's his name, but he told me about a term that I feel like I've mentioned it to other people and nobody seems to know what I'm talking about, the Tommy soybeans. Are you familiar with this?
Nope.
No.
But we're all ears.
It's essentially just that like the Tommy soybean of the team is like the kid who's like a walk-on that comes in and then starts a safety or whatever, like a kid who's doesn't get many stars coming out of high school. Maybe he's going to play many downs in the NFL, but might get a shot at a practice squad or something. But just that hard-nosed, tough kid that Kirk Ferentz loves, and that's what I think about most in this is that Kirk Ferentz has to feel like that's the end of his era a little bit. Like as much as he talks about a lot of the things that are changing in college football, I mean, he what was the word he used when somebody asked him about it?
Awful.
Yeah, this is awful.
I can't imagine.
He hates this.
Yeah, as a guy who, and Mark Farley's kind of the same way, wearing your UNI sweatshirt. And he talked about at his retirement presser of, it's been so great to spend time giving a chance to these Iowa farm kids across any athletic endeavor in Cedar Falls to bring them into the UNI campus and give them a shot to be a Division I athlete. These kids from Dyke New Hartford and Gladbrook Rhinebeck and Chipola, Denver Chipola and stuff like that. I mean, that has become interwoven into Eastern Iowa collegiate football, it feels like, at those highest levels. Even, the big ag school in Iowa State, they've done the same too. And it does feel like it's the end of an era. And I can't imagine Kirk having to look these guys in the eye who he talked about those opportunities, and now you have to say,
sorry, we're not there anymore.
We can't do it. And it's got to be heartbreaking. Mm-hmm. It's got to be heartbreaking.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, I've been surprised by some of the guys who have left the program to go in the portal, and I assume they're a result of a lot of those conversations. A guy like Trip Woody, for example. I can't make any assumption, but like Trip Woody, man, there's a high caliber kicker that they got out
off to Syracuse now, just committed yesterday.
Yeah. I mean, again, good for him getting a good opportunity, but it's like a guy that I'm sure that I would have loved to have kept around to succeed. Drew Stevens when he's gone, but just losing a lot of guys that became part of the heartbeat of that program, guys that you loved and had great teammates and probably would not have wanted to leave, but felt like they didn't have any choice at that point.
There's a lot of adapting that has to be had in college football, at least this year as they move into that new model next year. But another, if you're trying to look at where can Iowa maybe make up on that, is, the Alabamas of the world, the Georgia of the world, they can't hold on to those higher rated players that they get more 5 and 4 stars, and a lot of times they're waiting in the wings too. So maybe that talent trickles down to programs like Iowa, Wisconsin, Indiana, programs like that. I think that's the way you got to look at it. There's a ton of talent in the portal, and attacking that and filling in needs when you have them is probably the way to go. The one thing, his point I had never heard someone consider is what happens when like someone tears an ACL in the middle of the year. You can't go out and get a player in the middle of the season.
Yeah.
So you have to be set with your guys, and if it's a position you're really low at, that's going to be difficult. Maybe you have to switch players from positions they've been practicing all year and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's going to be interesting to see.
Makes you wonder how long this program will stick around. I feel like, is there any coach in the country who's happy with this 105 number? I feel like it just is like one of those things that every coach has to hate having these conversations. It's not like that's a unique to Kirk thing.
You get in a half a dozen more bodies, right? If you get it up to 112 or something like that, find a happy medium. Those bodies go a long, long way, especially, listen, Hawkeye football can tell you over the last 2 years, those injuries can hit really, really hard if you get them in the right or wrong spots. Jackson Stratton wasn't going to be playing football this year until everybody else went down, and you get those cool stories out of it again. But he's a walk-on.
I think there are arguments to having roster caps because the NFL has it. That's a little different system because you can go pick up free agents, but when you're having higher blue blood programs, go out and get you saw teams in the past just like take 30 player classes of all like highly rated players, and the ones that pan out were good and the ones that don't were kind of screwed. So I feel like there was kind of a reason for it, and I'm not saying it's good all around because I do think it hurts a lot of players too, like these walk-ons that are leaving.
Yeah. I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily worried in terms of the stories that are coming out of it, but just because I think that no matter what, there's going to be some good stories that we get a chance to tell. Even a guy like, think of a guy like Hayden Large. He transferred, and he wasn't a walk-on, I don't think. He came in as a scholarship guy, I believe, coming from Dort. But it's like he's still like one of the best stories on this year's team, a guy who, again, got injured in high school, had to duke it out at the NAIA level for a lot of years. There are just so few NAIA to FBS transfers. Like, you just never see that happen. Then he became one of the most beloved guys on the team this year. And so those stories, I think, are going to be there. They're just going to maybe look different than they did before.
Sure. Yeah, the diamonds in the rough are always there to find. Well, Mike talked about the SEC talent that maybe makes its way up north and to other programs because of how things are laying out now. Hank Brown from Auburn, he's practicing with the Iowa Hawkeyes right now.
That's wild.
That's a conversation in its own thing. But he's from Tim Lester's hometown. Tim went to high school with Hank's parents. It sounded like he ended up transferring from Wheaton Warrenville South, home of Tony Moyaki, Dace Richardson, Chuck Long, I believe. A lot of guys are from Wheaton. Ended up going to Lipscomb Academy in Nashville. So he's got a little bit of a homecoming coming up on this bowl trip. But Hank Brown's here. He's in the room. Brendan Sullivan back at QB1. Here's Kirk Ferentz talking about discovering Hank Brown, getting him from Auburn to Iowa City, and then this little quarterback camp they've kind of had as Brendan gets full go and puts that ankle injury in the past.
I know Tim has been really thorough with his evaluations on everybody, including high school film, and that was a big part of the evaluation, going back and watching all the prospects that we look at in high school, and then following it to whatever college tape may be there. And I think the things that Tim's looking for, he found that with Hank. And then the other key component is, what's it going to be like when we meet the prospect and his family and those types of things, and how we feel they're going to fit in the program, and then vice versa. It's got to be a mutual deal. So I feel really good about it. I think we're excited about it. And again, he's not going to play in this game, but we're going to add to the competition here in the spring and see how it goes. And both he and Jimmy Sullivan will be part of that. He feels fully confident. So the injury's in the history now. It's past, and he's doing really well. And now the thing is just getting caught up, because he missed a couple of weeks there. So this has been a good period where he's getting some work. And Tim even had like a little quarterback school going, a couple of days where we weren't working, but just, working those guys mentally and going out in the field and just walking through some things and letting them throw the ball to stationary guys, things like that, and things you can't do in the spring, because it's, all that's the stupid rules we have.
Oh, stupid rules. Jimmy Sullivan also out there, the highly touted recruit out of Fort Wayne. That feels like kind of a thing, trademark, capital A, capital T, of Tim Lester has basically cleansed the Brian Ferentz effect on the quarterback room. These are all, quote unquote, his guys. He held on to Jimmy Sullivan, though. That feels like something significant in the fact that Kirk goes out of his way to say, in a question about Hank Brown, oh, Jimmy's going to be part of that too.
Yeah.
Again, and this is the time of year, and we've got a nice little 4-month stretch here where we are going to jump to some bold conclusions and really free associate about things. But this is a different quarterback room, but it's Tim Lester's quarterback room. It feels like a cautiously optimistic / exciting time considering what you've seen him do with Brennan and especially what you've seen him do with Jackson.
It's such a weird dynamic, like with when the news the other day came in, like that is it Pribula,
yeah.
Pribula, that he was not going to come to Iowa, he was going to go to Mizzou. I'm just like, what would Iowa have done with all of these quarterbacks next year? Like, I know that this year was like a disaster in terms of the amount of injuries that happened in the quarterback room. Like, you assume that that's not going to happen every year, that you've got to, find 3 or 4 different guys to line up at quarterback. But still, I'm just like, if next year comes and it's the first game against UMass, is that first game next year?
Is it UMass or Albany?
Albany, yeah.
Albany, that's right. But you've got Hank Brown, you've got Bo Pribula, you've got Brendan Sullivan, you've got Jimmy Sullivan, you've got Jackson Stratton out there. Like, that's just maybe too many quarterbacks to be had on a roster. And
Ohio State begs to differ. They had, and highly more. Right? I know I'm saying if you get 3
Folks
quarterbacks.
are still chatting about Devin Brown and what his possibility is coming out of the Buckeyes.
But it's like, those guys, I'm like, I want the best for those guys too. Like, they're missing out on a lot of opportunities if they all are just like sitting within one program. And, if, let's say it was Hank Brown who gets to start on day one and he stays healthy the whole year, that's 4 other guys who could be playing college football somewhere that are not going to get to do it. So I'm like, what are they going to do with all of these people out there? I don't even get it.
I think what you have to do, and it rings true when this whole Cade McNamara situation, you can't just pick a guy and think, especially in the transfer portal, and just rely on him to produce. So, like, if you can bring 3 guys in, or 4, and have them compete in spring, and then they can transfer after the spring portal too. So if, say they did that and Bo actually came here and he won the job, or there was, I doubt Kirk would declare a winner, but there was he was doing all the ones, maybe Sullivan leaves and then Hank Brown still has 3 years, right, of eligibility. He could be the guy in a couple years. That's what I saw. Like, okay, you have, Sullivan has 2 or 3 years? 2?
I believe 2.
So I think you have a competition for that. Who's the starter now? And then Hank, and even to extend Jackson Stratton, would be like, who's your next starter?
Yeah.
And then who's your backups just in case of stuff happen?
It just I don't know if worry is the right word, but I'm just like, is it just going to be a discussion about the quarterback battle every year? Anytime a guy struggles, it's like, okay, now they're going to be
every
calling for
team,
Purdue,
right?
It's going to be calling for Marco Lainez. I mean, it's like, I don't know if is it every team? I guess I don't know if they're doing that down at Ole Miss where Jackson's dart is, leading the.
Well, I was going to say, if you have a quarterback you're confident in and performs well, then you don't, right? Like
you've
Dart,
got
Brady,
guy,
Cook.
yeah. Brendan's got 1 year left. I think that felt like the discussion.
Okay.
He played 22, 23, 24. So it'll be interesting to see. I get the feeling that if Pribula would have come to Iowa, Brendan'd be done.
Yeah.
They feel like 2 different human beings, 2 different people. 8 billion of us were all unique.
Same skill set.
There you go. What were you gaining by bringing him in? And then was $1.5 million sounds like was the price.
That's what the rumors are on Twitter, that it was,
and
don't
Twitter's
think Iowa can compete with that.
But that's to get essentially the same skill set and more eligibility, a few more years.
I think he's a better passer, though.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be honest. I was super excited if they would have gotten him. I'm not to say that I'm disappointed that with what we have, because I do think there's potential. But just seeing what he did against Wisconsin and in those other roles, I was like, man, this would be kind of a home run. And I think Missouri fans, if you look online, are pretty happy like that. But still, like you said, Mitch, I think you got a good room in there right now.
Yeah, I think you've got to be excited because again, these are Tim's guys. To your point, Mike, though, do we think Brendan Sullivan, first game back in almost 2 calendar months, right? Went out against UCLA.
Yeah.
6, 7 weeks, 8 weeks. Do you think Iowa throws a little more in the bowl game because does Tim want to figure out, hey, if we ask Brendan to throw it 25, 30 times a game, which doesn't sound like a lot to anybody else. For Iowa, that's, talk about Petrus going for 50 against Northwestern in 20. Do you think Iowa wants to figure something out in this game? Does Tim Lester want to figure out his room a little more in this game?
I think so, right? I think, and you heard from, who was it? What did Kirk say that they were practicing on passing more? I might have heard that from Chad Leistiko's podcast.
We talk about that, yeah.
That's what they're working on right now, and rightfully so. You heard him.
Especially when you don't have KJ out there. And, Kamari will be good, Jazz will be good. And he talked about Xavier Williams and Brevin Dahl, and we'll hear from Jazz in a little bit. But it feels like, okay, your bell cow's gone. Let's figure some other stuff out when you've got Reese Vanderzee and Jacob Gill and everybody there.
Yeah. Bowl games seem to be like a jumping point into next season rather than like a culmination of the season, right, these days. And I hope they do come out and see what Brendan has, against this SEC defense, I think there's only one linebacker who played, but he didn't. I think he got benched like halfway through the season, didn't play a lot. That's opting out. So it should be like mostly their starters.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case at a lot of positions. That for all the guys that are deciding to play, it's like maybe they do rotate a few more guys at linebacker just to see what some of those younger guys have got out there. Guys at cornerback that they might rotate in a little bit more often. I think that we'll see. They're going to decide a lot based on what they see at quarterback, but probably a few other spots are going to try a few guys out.
I'll be interested to see if Jackson gets any more run, just because I'd be interested to see how much they want to figure out in this game, because you want to win it. Kirk's going for 205, trying to tie Woody Hayes. So this isn't just a free. I know people talk about it, especially at the end of the season, of like, what is there to lose? Like, what do you do? Well, wouldn't you like to send out the senior class, giving Kirk a milestone win, and then let the other guys get 206 there in the opener? Not that exactly they're thinking about that kind of thing, but it's just interesting to wonder what we'll see, as this is a bit of an exploratory scenario.
I just thought about the last Music City Bowl, and I'm like, what are we kidding? Kirk's going to want to win the game. They had Joey Labus in 2 pick sixes, was 21-0, and they didn't really show anything, right? Yeah. They didn't let any other.
It all depends on the start, yeah.
Yeah. I guess they did do the Wildcat with Sam Laporta, which I'll never forget.
I was going to say most memorable part of that game was seeing Laporta lineup.
He had a little backyard play yesterday, too.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Did you know that the Packers did that unintentionally earlier in the season against the Bears?
Jamal Spencer, who was the sports director at ZZM when I was in GR and is an MSU grad, Brian Hoyer did that in 2007 in Mark D'Antonio's. They did the same thing where, like, quarterback just dips a little lower than usual on the play action and looks like it's dropped, and hit Kellen Davis for a wide open streak touchdown. Tight end just ran a go route. So it's a play that's been around.
Well, Jordan Love actually fumbled it and picked it up, and the Bears defense crashed
Ben Johnson
up.
said that was the genesis of it.
Oh, yeah?
Like, well, what if we just did that on purpose and got everybody to suck up real quick, and then you open? Yeah. So thank you to the Packers helping the Detroit Lions continue their historic season. We talked about Jazz Patterson and Kamari Moulton and Brevin Dahl and Xavier Williams and the opportunities they have. They are the next men in this bowl game as Kaleb Johnson goes and preps for the pros. So here's Jazz, a minute with him and Owen, talking about the opportunity there and what he learned from Kaleb, watching him have the year he did for the Hawks.
This is definitely a big opportunity. With our brother Kaleb declined for the draft, we've been working like hard. Me, Kamari, Xavier, Brevin Dahl, Max White, all the other running backs. But it's definitely like a special opportunity because like now it's like, okay, who gonna be that guy? Like who gonna do what? Like it's excitement. I learned to build like confidence in myself. Like confidence is like the biggest factor to success, I feel like, because I had to talk with Kaleb, and like through the years, he had to build that level of confidence to where he got real confident this year, and like he seen success from it. So basically, like definitely building that confidence factor gonna take you a long way, especially for me. I think it'll take me a long way if I build that level of confidence in my play and my prep.
What are your expectations for Jazz or Kamari? Or boy, we've been hearing whispers about Brevin Dahl, and obviously we know his high school career here. Xavier Williams is a big back. What are our expectations for the Iowa run game in a game where maybe they want to figure out a little more about the passing game?
Jazz and Kamari just strike me as kind of different runners. Jazz seems like he's built in the Kaleb Johnson model. Like their body types are just very similar, I think.
He loves contact. Whereas Kamari, not that Kamari, I mean, Kamari's just a little smaller, but when he gets in space, he's really shifty. But yeah, I think, Mike, you pointed out last year, like, Jazz hits everyone as hard as he possibly can on every run.
And Kamari is shifty, and he's been the number 2 guy, it seems like, all the time. Anytime Kaleb needed a spell, it was Kamari that was in there, and we saw some really big bursts from him at some point. So I think that we'll see probably 75% of snaps go to Kamari, maybe a little less, maybe more like 65%. But by the time next year comes around, it's just going to be such an odd running back battle because even this year's running back battle didn't even play itself out until like after game 1. It was like supposed to be LaShawn kind of coming in. Like he was the preseason guy who was on the watch list, and then all of a sudden Kaleb Johnson does what he does, and LaShawn kind of gets pushed into the background. And so that's kind of stuff, even if we're talking running backs this time in August, like it still might take a game or two to flesh itself out.
I hope it's like a 50-50 split with Brevin and Williams getting some carries too. Not 50-50 from them, but just like Jazz and Kamari getting 50-50, not the total 100%, and then some minor carries go into the other just to see what we have.
Yeah.
I always thought Jazz had that burst and that speed, and it was almost like Kaleb a few years ago, where I'm like, I expect more out of him, and then he doesn't get them as many carries. If you would have asked me how many yards I thought he would get prior to the season, we had that lower third up, and it was like 235. I thought he had more carries to get those yards, and he, and in times he's shown bursts, and then he can burst through the hole.
He had the long one against Troy. Last year against Iowa State, he had right up there with LaShawn of like the longest play of the season for Iowa, and he ripped off like 81 on that one or something like that.
Yeah, I would say, that totally. And so they've got talent, him and Kamari. But, you saw that there was separation from KJ, though. He was just a different breed, almost. Yeah. And I wonder if they can take that next step. Not sure if they can, but this is a good start against an SEC defense. And
a good offensive line.
I bet I was going to get a lot of carries, so.
Yeah, it would be interesting. I would be, frankly, a little surprised to see Brevin Dahl in there, even though we hear talk about him. Like, is he a true freshman this year?
Yeah.
Like, he's just still so young that I don't think he's taken a snap this year, as far as I'm aware. And so to get a chance to see him out there, like, that'd be great. Sure. I'd love to see him in action, but seems like he'd be maybe the least likely guy in the running back room right now.
That's true. But historically,
they like him a lot.
Historically, I feel like running back's the one position where, maybe not the one position, but a true freshman. I'm thinking Marcus Coker. Didn't he play as a true freshman?
He played late in 2010, and then the Insight Bowl was his 219, 2 scores, and that was
Brendan Wager, Adam Robinson. I think Robinson was a redshirt freshman when he got all his carries, but like
that was 09.
They trust younger guys sometimes when
hold on to the ball.
Yeah, if you fumble, not so much, but it hasn't happened in a little bit. I guess Johnson got a couple carries as a redshirt freshman, I think, his freshman year. So
Kaleb Johnson, true freshman,
true freshman against
that Nevada game. He ripped off his first touchdown run. That was a fun one where he like bulldozed the guy, and then obviously that Purdue game is when he really started to shine.
Brevin Dahl did not see any game action, but this year he was honored as the team leader award on both offense and special teams.
He dressed for a couple games late.
Okay.
I think he might have made the trip to Maryland. Maybe I'm convoluting somebody with him, but he's they're high on him. We turn real quick to get a glance at Mizzou, 9-3 coming in out of the SEC. They were one of those teams that people talked about them being a dark horse coming into 2024. Brady Cook was a guy that maybe folks thought could be a dark horse for the Heisman. You see there, middle of the road kind of across the board on offense. Defense, a little more to write home about there. Top 40 in basically all those main categories. What are our thoughts on Mizzou? What do we know about them? We know that their top playmaker on offense is going to be out for this one, so maybe that pass defense, pass offense, already 76th in the country, maybe takes another hit there. But again, Cook's still back there, and you're going to be playing against a lot of starters on the defense as well.
Yeah, I mean, again, not that I know a ton about this team, but they seem like they have some similarities to Iowa in a way, kind of going through some SEC stats. It's like you're not going to see them at the top of the SEC leaderboard in many things, if anything, in terms of individual or team stats, but they're high up there in things like turnover margin and penalties. They don't commit a lot of penalties, and they're a team that seems like they just have good fundamentals. Of course, I mean, I think the last time we talked about Eli Drinkwitz, what he's done there at Mizzou, who, I mean, was kind of also ran in the SEC for a lot of years, and he's turned them into a relevant program that was were they top 10 team for a hot minute this year?
They were ninth, I think, in September.
So turn them into certainly a relevant SEC team, and so they seem like they're well coached, and we'll maybe talk about a little bit of some players who are gone or going to the portal or whatever, but like they seem like it's another team with a lot of guys who are going to stick around and play in this game.
Yeah, similar I won't say similar trajectories, parallels to the season as Mizzou and Iowa. I think prior to the season, their fans, and I think more so on Mizzou's side, on the national side, thought dark horse playoff team. They're obviously in the SEC where you could say it's more difficult, but I guess Big Ten on the top of that conference too is pretty difficult. No one thought Indiana would be a playoff team to start the season, but when things went, as the season progressed, they kind of lost to the teams they should have. I think they lost to South Carolina.
That was a good game, though.
Yeah, it was.
In Columbia. 34-30 back on the 16th. South Carolina won.
Got blown out against Texas A&M on the road.
Texas A&M won 41-10. A couple weeks after that, they went to Tuscaloosa. Alabama won 34-0.
Yeah. So, I think they played a lot more of the SEC's tough side, but still a lot of talent. I mean, Brady Cook, I think he's a Missouri kid, wanted to be a Missouri quarterback, and he wants to come out there. This is not going to be a game where a lot of opt-outs and teams, just because they didn't make the playoff, they're not going to show up. I think both teams are going to show up. Should be an exciting, fun game.
It feels like that Insight Bowl in 2010 where you had two teams that maybe didn't perform up to expectations completely. That Iowa team, folks thought they had a shot at a Big Ten title, ended up finishing 8-5 with that 8th win against Mizzou. Mizzou rolled in that game with Blaine Gabbert, TJ Moe, Michael Agnew was a top tight end prospect going into the draft. Gabbert was 2 or 3 overall pick to the Jags, and they came in I think ranked 12th in the country. So they'd maybe overachieved a little bit, but that was before the days of the opt out and things like that, and you had teams chasing some stuff there. Yeah. And this feels a little bit like that. Ironically, the last time they played, you've got an opportunity for some guys to get out there and get some shine, and then those veteran guys get a chance to end their careers with a win.
Yeah, boy, if they get one more win, if any of those losses turned around, are they a playoff team? I mean, if they win any of those games, say they don't lose to South Carolina by 4, they'd be 10-2, 6-2 in the SEC. They'd have a pretty legitimate case to make the CFP if any of those 1 losses gets turned around.
They'd be closer. Their 2 losses would just be absolute blowouts to Alabama and
non-CFP teams.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're ranked it's obviously different if they win one of those games, right, the rankings. Mm-hmm. But at 19, you got in 1 win, can that get you up to 11? I think it'd be tough to pass Alabama if that's not the one that you switch and say they won.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're, not just take shine off a 9-3 season. That's awesome. You win at home in your finale against Arkansas by 1 score. Arkansas was bottom half of the SEC. Before that, you get a nice win on the road against Mississippi State, who was bottom of the SEC.
It's not like Iowa. Who's your best win?
Yeah, it's the parallels between them and Iowa.
Vanderbilt by 3.
Vanderbilt's a decent enough win, but your big wins, your blowout wins are at UMass, at home against Buffalo, at home in your opener against Murray State. So they just feel like very similar teams, don't they?
Because I think if you're looking
strengths, but boy, talk about having kind of the same season.
I think if you're looking at, if you're a Missouri fan, you're looking at Iowa's schedule, you're probably saying something similar. You probably don't respect the Big Ten, and you're like, your best win's Minnesota, 7-5. Your best win is, you're looking through the schedule, and you'd be like, you played Ohio State, you lost 35-7. The box score you can read the box score and say you're only down 7-0 at half, which Tennessee was not down at half by that amount this past week. But, you still lost 35-7 against the best team, and you lost to Iowa State, who was another, 10-win team. So very similar, I think. The only thing that's missing is you don't have a close loss to a top 15 team like Mizzou does against South Carolina, which is a pretty quality loss, if we're putting quality loss in quotes.
Say this about Tennessee. It's a different game in the cold, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
This is off topic and total chaos theory. Do you think there should be a division in those first round games, those early games, of teams below the Mason-Dixon line? They compete. You have a north bracket and a south bracket. Because didn't that feel like such a dividing line? Whether it was SMU at Penn State or Tennessee,
and I love it.
Don't do the pregame without your shirt on when you haven't been in 20-degree weather before.
Yeah.
You're tough.
It's gonna
We
kick
get
your
it.
butt. And boy, I even looked at Nico Yamaliava on the sideline before the kick, and I texted a group thread. I go, Nico looks cold already. And he sparked a little bit, and we know what he can do from last year's bowl game. But I'm like, it's just different. Mm-hmm. It's just different. And, and you wonder if it's almost an unfair advantage for those teams that are in the North.
For years, though, when Big Ten teams go to Florida or whatever, and it's like super humid on January, there was always like, well, these SEC teams are used to the heat at this point in the year. It gets that way in August in Iowa, but it's not like that since September 1st, So I love it. I think it should stay. I do fear the committee is going to retool it and let's go to a neutral site.
Let's make sure like we've got this bracket, and then we'll come together on neutral sites in 70-degree weather.
Yeah.
But that was my thought of that. It's just like, boy, if you're a Southern team that has to go on the road in these early rounds in the college ball playoff, and you got to go to Happy Valley, or you got to go to Columbus or Ann Arbor or wherever it may be, and you got to play outdoors in December. It was weird having them pump up the fact this is the first December game ever in the Horseshoe. Of course it is.
Obviously, thank you.
That's not a stat.
Well, Iowa had a December game against Wisconsin in the
for sure.
COVID season. So I guess did they play 2 away games?
Yeah.
That's
to end the year.
They played. They had the game against Michigan. Was that supposed to be in Iowa City?
I remember. Maybe I'm wrong on this. I remember that season going at like 2 weeks into December. Maybe it didn't.
Yeah, they played up in Minnesota. Was that a November game? I can't remember. I'd look it up, but why bother?
Whatever.
Let's focus. Go ahead.
Did I have one? Oh, I think the only thing that they would retool, and I think I could see them retooling this even by this next year, and I think would help at least in the spread of these scores, is just doing a straight 1 to 12 rankings. I mean, I don't mind the seeding system right now. Like, it's kind of fun seeing Boise State get a first round bye and see them in the quarterfinals. At the same time, I feel like somebody made a good point. It's like when you have the NCAA tournament, it's not like the 4 best conference champions get the number 1 seed in the tournament. It's like it just goes to the 4 best teams. So it seems like that should stick with the CFP. That's like you just give the first round bye to the 4 best teams, and then if you had if it was Boise State versus hosting SMU or something like that, then that might get a little more interesting than the scores we saw over the weekend.
And it's kind of interesting that Penn State loses the Big Ten title to Oregon, and Oregon has to play Ohio State in its first game, and Penn State gets SMU and Boise.
Yeah.
Oregon's gift for winning the Big Ten and going undefeated is probably the toughest path to the playoff championship.
Yeah.
Wild.
Yeah.
And Penn State, you could argue, has the easiest because they lost. You get an SMU team at home, and then you go up against Boise State. So that's all due respect to the Broncos.
I think Boise State's good. It's just who would you rather face,
Obviously.
Boise or Ohio State?
Yeah.
All right, bowl picks. Most exciting time of the year. We're gonna. We got 7 of these I wrote out. 6, and then we'll have some fun at the end with this. We're going to start with the pinstripe. Oh, first, where are we right now in the rankings, Mike? Oh, Lord. Not rankings, but records.
Oh, okay. Record-wise, we are.
We haven't done this for a little while.
Yeah.
You still leading the way?
I'm leading the way, 32 and 35, 3 games under. Mitch is 31 and 36, 1 game back, and then Owen is 28 and 39.
That's some ground to make up.
Hey, what a better opportunity than bowl season, Owen. We are going to start with this upcoming Saturday, the Pinstripe Bowl in lovely New York City. Boston College against the Nebraska Cornhuskers. They are 2.5-point favorites, are Nebraska. 11 a.m. kick on ABC for the Pinstripe Bowl.
Talk about 2 teams that are used to playing in the cold. At least they're sending those 2 teams to New York City.
Weather will not be a factor.
I think Nebraska, as long as they don't have a whole lot of opt-outs, I haven't followed their postseason trajectory, what's been happening with them, but I think that Nebraska could win this game. I think that them playing in a bowl game for the first time since 2016, they'll be excited about this, and after the way that the Iowa game ended, I think that they would like to prove something out there and have a winning record at the end of their season.
Yeah, Boston College played Missouri tough, and they were ranked, and they beat
Boston College early when Thomas Castellanos was still
the starter
with them. Yeah, still the starter. That was.
He's at Florida State now, who they beat.
That's why I loved that win for Michigan State earlier in the year, because they went to BC and got a pretty darn good win there.
I thought BC beat them. Maybe they stormed the field.
I don't know. I remember them having a good. Was that the walk-off? Yeah.
Yeah.
Walk-off. They had I considered it a good loss. Now that I remember.
If they would have won, they would have been bowl eligible.
There you go.
But I'm going to go Nebraska too. Dylan Raiola is still playing. They do have a few opt-outs, I believe. I believe like a wide receiver is out, and I can't blank on his name. But they should be mostly intact, I think.
Can't believe I forgot MSU lost to BC. I championed that game so much. I was just encouraged by it. I'm going to take Nebraska, too. I think that's, good for Nebraska. Don't touch that dial. Stay on ABC. You'll never hear a CBS affiliate say that again. On Saturday, 2:30 kick for the Pop-Tarts Bowl. Iowa State against Miami. The Hurricanes
For the
are
toaster.
favorites for a trophy that's a toaster. Practical.
Miami did struggle late in the regular season. I know they felt like they should be in the CFP. I don't think they had much of an argument when they lost a couple of games down the stretch. I think that I like Iowa State in this game. I think that they are just going to come out with a little more motivation. Cam Ward is playing in this game, I believe, yes.
Yep.
But it seems like Miami just, even early in the season when they were undefeated in a top 5 team or whatever, I just did not have a lot of faith in that team. It seems like Cam Ward worked his magic in the fourth quarter, but they were just not a team I had a lot of trust in, so I think Iowa State could win this thing.
Yeah, I expected this to be a shootout. Miami's not tough defensively, but their offense is very good, top 3 or top 5 nationally. And the two teams they did play, I think, or lose to, I think were sneaky good. Georgia Tech, you saw them take Georgia to the wire. Syracuse has like 8 wins this year, and
Him and McCord talk about a shootout there, yeah.
I think Miami is going to win this game. I just like Cam Ward. He's a Heisman finalist. He's a heck of a quarterback, and they've got a good offense. And yeah, I just don't want to pick Iowa State too. So
There you go.
I think Becht versus Ward is going to be super, super fun, and that Iowa State wide receiver room could have some success too. I'll take Miami though. It's a game in Florida. They don't have to deal with a whole lot of the the craziness of the bowl situation. And I've been on Cam Ward since Incarnate Word. I can't bail on him now in his collegiate finale. We'll come back to Iowa, Missouri here in a little bit. The ReliaQuest Bowl, Alabama against Michigan. Give things a year and see how things unfold. New Year's Eve day, 11 a.m. on ESPN. The Tide, 10.5-point favorite over the Wolverines.
Feels like a pretty hefty spread there at 10.5. It seems like Michigan came out there and they played their butts off against Ohio State, and I know they like Sharon Moore. They like playing for this dude, and so I think Michigan can keep this one tight if they don't win it.
I wanted to pick that, but I just like Alabama's quarterbacks playing, Milroe, and their wide receivers still playing, not a lot of opt-outs. Yeah. I just think Alabama is so much better than Michigan that they're just going to roll. But, I thought the same thing that against Ohio State, but this isn't one of those rivalries where Ryan Day is going to get inside his head, or Kalen DeBoer is not going to get inside his head.
I feel like Ohio State, so you're taking Michigan or Alabama to cover?
Yep.
Yeah. I feel like the Ohio State loss is such an outlier.
100%.
They didn't play their game. I mean, to borrow a phrase from Joel Klatt, Michigan just loves playing in those phone booth games. Kind of like Iowa. Michigan this year is the most Big Ten West team you could imagine, of just like, hey, let's just pound it out. Quarterback play, we're figuring out. Bryce Underwood, I think, will be a massive, massive improvement for them. If not next year, then in 26. So I'm going to take Alabama to roll Tide. I think they are just tremendous, even if they are in that kind of same bracket of, oh, we didn't make the playoff, what do we have to play for? I think Kalen DeBoer will have them ready, and that'll be that could be one of those games where the SEC folks of like Alabama should have been in. That's that game they'll tout of like, well, look what they did to this team here. Mm-hmm. Citrus Bowl. This is going to be a fun one. Number 15, South Carolina, 9.5-point favorites over number 20, Illinois. Another New Year's Eve day game, 2 p.m. on ABC. Can the Big Ten West reign over that South Carolina squad that Owen so badly wanted to play?
Yeah.
You wanted that.
I was touting those guys for a spot in the CFP so badly. They just had such a good team over the last 6 games of the season. Won 6 in a row. Illinois, I mean, they lost a couple of games in the middle there and then rallied to win 3 at the end of the year against some of the Big Ten bottom feeders. But 9.5 points, huh? I'll still pick SC to come out there and hopefully prove. I mean, their freshman QB is so good.
He's so fun.
I mean, that's going to be a guy who's going to be
Sellers?
Heisman.
Yeah.
I think next year.
And they only have one opt-out so far,
Really?
an edge guy, yeah. So I was expecting probably a little more opt-outs just because when you miss out on a playoff, just like Alabama, like you think that the players are going to be like, what am I playing for? Maybe there's a shift in things this year. There's still a lot of opt-outs nationally. But 9.5 is a big spread. I think Illinois is better than a lot of people think. I just kind of like their team. I'm going to pick Illinois to cover the spread, but I think South Carolina's going to win.
I'm in the same boat there. Luke Altmaier, also coming back. Illini, they'll build around him for another year. I don't know if they win this thing, but I think that's going to be a fun Citrus Bowl. That's going to be a real fun Citrus Bowl. So I'll take the Illini to cover the 9.5.
More fun than last year's Citrus Bowl.
Maybe. I don't recall. Don't recall the situation. Duke's Mayo Bowl, January 3rd, 6:30 p.m. on ESPN. Minnesota, Vatek, the Gophers, 6.5-point favorites. Boy, you want to talk about a team that's been active in the portal? Minnesota's got they got to be pushing 10 guys they've signed out of the portal already. It's pretty wild, but none of them will be on the field, obviously, for the Mayo Bowl. But is PJ Fleck going to get some Hellmans, or Dukes, I should say? Stick with the branding.
Those Hellmans would be kind of wild.
I was going to say, I do love Hellmans. Hellmans is my mayonnaise brand. Love those guys.
I have no opinion.
No, not an ad, but love some Hellmans. That's what Jimmy John serves, I believe, former employee.
We're just plugging. If you want to plug, just tell us, and we'll just say your name.
Minnesota, boy, could they end the year as the best 8-win team in the country if they win this thing? Are they the best 7-win team out of the regular season? Minnesota's had some nice wins that they've picked up this year. I think that Minnesota will come out and have something to play for, and I just have visions of PJ Fleck covered in mayo dancing through my head this holiday season.
I really hope that happens because just put the clown in mayo. Yeah. I think Minnesota's going to win this game. I don't think Virginia Tech is that good this year, so I'm going to pick Minnesota. I think PJ gets it done.
Sky-Yuma, row the boat. Don't call him a clown. That's my friend. All right, Iowa, Missouri, Music
you
City
picked Minnesota?
Bowl. Yeah, I took Minnesota. I didn't say Sky-Yuma, row the boat. Go Hokies. No, Iowa, Missouri, 1:30 ESPN on next Monday, a week from today. Missouri is a 3-point favorite. Can the Hawkeyes cover and win and get number 205 for KF?
I think that maybe I've just got, again, visions of the Citrus Bowl still dancing through my head as well, that Iowa against SEC opponents. They did it against Kentucky, but could not do it against Tennessee last year. I think I like Missouri in this one.
You like Missouri, huh? Mm-hmm. I've been going back and forth.
Is a lovely city.
Kansas
City.
For the most part, all year have been saying this Missouri team was only ranked to feed in the SEC narrative because they could be a top 25 win for Alabama, who blew them out, for South Carolina. And I do think there's a portion of that's true, but I do think this team, when you stack them against Iowa, very similar. And, Iowa actually, we obviously learned that they didn't deserve a CFP spot and or a ranking in that matter. So I do think that this game will be a lot closer. I just don't think Missouri is one of the top 20 teams in the country, even though they're ranked 19th right now. So I do think it's going to be a little closer. I think I'm going to pick Missouri to win, but I could imagine Iowa winning this game if the ground game gets going. Yeah. I just think Missouri is going to, again, try and stop the run and make Iowa beat them over the top, and they haven't done it all year, so I'm not expecting them to do it, this game.
I just can't shake the notion of seeing Jay Higgins after telling Kirk in the Washington post game, here's your 200th win, you got 5 more to Woody Hayes. I can't get the poetry out of my head of that being the walk-off. Mm-hmm. So for no other reason besides that, and I like some matchups here and there, I'll take Iowa to cover. I think Iowa gets their 9th win. And what a ride that, I think that would be, 53 wins for the 5 guys that are 6-year seniors that have been with Iowa the whole time. Quinn Schulte, Sebastian Castro, Nick DeYoung, Kyler Fisher, and I'm forgetting somebody. Jermari would have been if he stuck around. There might be one other guy. Or maybe it's just those 4 now. 53 wins in 6 years.
That's a lot.
You'll take that, yeah. I have nothing else to add.
I do think it'll be a good game. I don't think it's going to be like the Citrus Bowl from last year. Yeah. I think Iowa's defense will play a lot better. Just the quarterback play of that game was
I think people forget
subpar.
that Joe Milton opted out of that game like 4 days prior, right? Like
that's right.
like up against it. So I think did it in the middle of one of Iowa's practices because I remember Quinn having the reaction, "Oh, he opted out. Didn't know that." And I'm sure they were prepping for Nico as best they could.
I'm pretty sure he opted out way before then, but didn't announce it publicly.
Didn't announce it, yeah. And so like you're prepping for Joe Milton and prepping for Nico Imaliava. Those are two immensely different skill sets, and then you've got an offense that's not being able to move the ball and it's turning it over and a calamity.
Yeah, not just. I mean, they set up Tennessee for like 2 or 3 touchdowns. Like there was a pick six, there was another turnover right inside the 10 or the 5, and
they were driving in that opening drive. Yeah.
So like when you spot them like that, it's just not going to be a close game, especially when you can't move the ball. But I think this game's different because obviously Brendan's back and he's at least going to be able to give it a second option on the ground. And if they've been practicing the passing game, hopefully we see a little bit of that.
Vandersey back. I could see Lachey having a nice day.
Finally scoring a touchdown this year, hopefully.
Hey, he had a touchdown in the Music City Bowl a couple years ago. And that was all yak, basically, from Labus. So we'll see what happens there. This is just for fun. This isn't going to count towards the rankings because it's like 6 games in one. Fill out for me the rest of the college football playoff bracket. Who's your national champ? Who wins these next games? Anybody can start.
Boy, yeah. If I'm just running through it.
I'll just go off this because we're not picking the spread, just the winners.
Sure. I would say I'm going to say Boise State. I'm going to say Notre Dame, Ohio State, and Texas win this weekend. I think Ohio State beats Texas, and I think Notre Dame beats Boise State. Do I have a Notre Dame Ohio State national championship game?
Wow.
And I'll say Ohio State. I think that that'll be something that at least Ohio State fans again coming after Ryan Day for not winning the.
Can't beat Michigan, but is the national champion.
But okay, he wins the national championship. Big deal. Can't beat Michigan.
Fire him.
So I'm going to say Ohio State over Notre Dame in the.
You will be shocked how many Maize and Blue supporters would be like, whatever.
We were talking earlier. I'll go first. I'll go second. We were talking earlier about like who have you beat? Well, who has Texas beat this year? All right, outside of Clemson, who's probably the team that was. They were a champion, so they deserve to be there.
You are so lucky Nick Stewart's not here.
Yeah, I know, right? I'm going to go with Cam Scadaboo
by Clemson.
And the team no one thinks going to win. I got Arizona State winning the Peach Bowl.
That'll be an interesting game. Yeah.
I've got Oregon beating Ohio State. I know they're hot because they just beat Tennessee, but it's going to be in a hotter climate. Yeah. And Oregon is going to, they already beat them one time. I think they're vastly underrated from, as a number 1 seed. I don't think anyone really, I shouldn't say anyone. I think a lot of people think an SEC team's going to come out on top. I think Oregon is going to go far. I'll take Penn State over Boise and Notre Dame over Georgia, and then Notre Dame against Oregon in the final. And then I'll have Oregon as the champion.
I'm going to take, I like that Arizona State team. I'm going to take Texas, though. Texas, I'm going to come back to Ohio State, Oregon. Penn State, Notre Dame. If Carson Beck was healthy, I'd take Georgia. But I still might take. Give me Georgia. I'm still going to take Georgia. And I'm going to take Oregon. And I think Ohio State is as good as Oregon. If Will Howard slides 1 second earlier, they probably walk off with a field goal win in Eugene. That's going to be a hell of a game. That's going to be a lot of fun. I will then take Penn State over Georgia in the Orange Bowl. I'll take Oregon over Texas in the Cotton Bowl.
Big Ten rematch, huh?
And I think the Oregon Ducks are your national title winners.
Excuse me.
But sometimes I'll fill out a bracket and I hate what I end up with.
Did you hear the disdain in my voice? Whoever wins Oregon, Ohio State will be your national champ.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. I can't believe I just...
Are we Big Ten homers right now?
Wow. Super.
I just think those are...
They're good.
Those are the two best teams I've seen all year.
Yeah.
It'd be different if Carson Beck was healthy. But that's so tough to overcome.
Notre Dame is such an interesting story this year. I mean, again, starting the season with a loss against Northern Illinois, it's like, who had any hopes that this Notre Dame team could be one of the quarterfinalists in the CFP. Like, they have turned it around in such an incredible way. To see them in the championship game will be, not like, oh, those plucky underdogs from over there in Notre Dame, but still an interesting story with Coach Freeman and what he's done there.
And in the last, 15 years when they've gone to the Natty, they have been, was it 2012 they had Everett Golson? They played, was that Alabama?
Alabama got blown out, yeah.
Like 42-17, something like that. It doesn't feel like they've ever gone in. It's always been like, hey, like, Notre Dame's going to play for a title. Good luck. If they're at the table in this one, it's like Notre Dame's got a real shot to win this thing. And again, yeah, you go back 3 months ago when Thomas Hammock and the Northern Illinois Huskies are walking off in South Bend with a win. Like, that's as wild of a story as you could ever ask for.
Yeah, an NIU team that's expected to join the Mountain West soon.
Because if there's one thing I know about Northern Illinois, DeKalb, Illinois fits in perfectly with,
those beautiful mountain vistas.
The weird part about this year, too, is there's not an SEC team that you think is so dominant. You've seen it from Georgia when they played Clemson, when they beat up on Texas, but they lost to Alabama, which is a good team, and they look like they're going to lose a couple games. I think Kentucky, they had a tough game. Ole Miss, they lost to Ole Miss, right? And then they almost lost to Georgia Tech. So, Texas is the same way, where I'm looking at their schedule, and it's like, well, your best win is A&M, which is a good win, but it's not like on the level of Alabama's and Georgia's of past years, where you're like, wow, this team is a juggernaut. So when you're going into and you're looking at the bracket, you're like, who's the best team? You can maybe think that a Big Ten team is going to beat one of those, or Notre Dame, who I think is a good team.
Yeah, I think they're
great team.
Yeah,
It's a good chance we don't have any SEC teams in the national semifinals. Wild stuff.
it's a different era. What do you say? I don't know, ESPN. Whatever you want to say. All right.
Alabama should have made it.
Yeah.
That's what they'll say.
All right, Owen and I will start our coverage from Nashville Friday during our 9 o'clock. We've got a nice little 9-hour drive down there. We'll maybe switch off in St. Louis or something like that. We haven't discussed driving, but I figured that's the way to go. We'll figure it out. Plenty of stuff to do before Monday at 1:30 and kick off there. Final thoughts for this final pod of 2024. Will we do one more? We'll do one right after.
We did a post-mortem last year. I don't know if we're going to do one this year, but I think it's worth it. Even looking at once the portal season finalizes, I know they're still in for a couple guys. It's nothing like we've seen from Minnesota or Missouri. No roster flipping and like you've seen other places. But I think they have less transfers out than a lot of other programs.
They've retained, you get Graves to stay, you get Herc to stay for another year. That's basically like adding through the portal. If you want
for sure.
Do something like that. All right. We'll see you in Nashville, folks. Let us know in the comments or wherever if you're making the trek down there. If you drove to Dallas 2 years ago, this is 3 hours shorter. I mean, you can't afford not to. So we'll meet you down there. See you on Broadway. For Mike and Owen, I'm Mitch. Have a safe travel. Have a safe, happy holiday season. Merry Christmas. We'll see you next time on Eye on the Hawks.